Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started recording here. First of all, sorry, I had a little bit of technical difficulties on Tuesdays, why I didn't really have a session then. Yeah, my plan is I'll probably just kind of recover most of the stuff that we had gone over on Tuesday. There's not a whole lot left here, so just reminders of where we're at. Hopefully everybody's keeping up with the class. This is really our last week of, well, it's not true. So we've got this week and next week face-to-face classes. Next week is mostly going to be review. I am recommending people look at the material in our textbook about the sort of the machine learning checklist. So I'll probably go back and talk about in the review, talk about some of the big picture sort of things and some of that advice for doing actual data science and machine learning projects for things. That kind of dovetails into your class project. So reminder that is due. That will be due by, I believe I gave it as a Thursday deadline during finals week. So we're almost done with this week. We got one more week of face-to-face classes. Then the week after that is finals week. Although also for this class, don't forget, next week we will be reviewing and we'll have a second test. I'm going to have that. It'll be online again. It'll be open the same like for the first test. I can't remember, but I'll probably have it open like Thursday and Friday. Actually, let me check that so I don't say anything wrong here on the video here. So right now, if I've got it set this kind of the same way that we've done before, we're going to have it. I gotta set the date again. So whatever we did before, I will have it open up next week. So I'll probably have it open up on Thursday and Friday of next week. So Tuesday we'll have a chance to review if anybody wants to ask questions or things, and then maybe even also on Thursday if people want to. Anyway. I need to get that set up before next week. But the format of the test, I'll go into more details of it, it has a similar kind of format to the first one. So there will be just some questions that you get through MyLeo Online, but you're expected to write code in a running IPython notebook, and then you should upload that notebook to an assignment folder in order to submit your work for the test 2. Okay, but let's leave going into details of that for next week then. I thought so the first part of our assignment 6 is on k-means clustering. This might be a relatively short session, but I'll just say a few words about clustering in general, and then k-means clustering. So the notebook, the lecture notebook from our textbook. Is from the chapter on unsupervised learning, which goes into a couple different unsupervised clustering techniques. But k-means clustering is probably the most common one. It's a basic technique. Most people kind of turn to that first if they want to do some unsupervised clustering of some data for some sort of a purpose. All right. So yeah, this notebook. I've only got this one. Although again, Dr. Ng's, I recommend his videos on unsupervised learning. So he has some things about this as well, including k-means clustering as well. He talks about. That's a good supplementary material for this unsupervised learning. My links to Dr. Ng's video. So let me check that this notebook is running cleanly here. I'd kind of forgotten that this notebook here is a little bit different. This isn't a lot of this isn't really my work. This is mostly from the these are mostly just the code examples from our textbook on clustering here. So let me bring up the textbook then. I'll go back and forth between these here to say a few things about clustering here to begin with. So. All right. Okay, so once again, just a little bit of background again. I think we've covered this before, but we are talking about unsupervised learning techniques for these last 2 or 3 weeks in the class, right? It is important to know about these, all right? So if nothing else, I hope people taking this class, understand the difference, right? So most of the course we did supervised learning. So that's really building a model where you have data, so a set of features and a set of samples, but those samples are all labeled, right? So and there's two main flavors of supervised learning. So we either do a classification or a regression supervised learning, right? So most all the models we talked about can do one or the other. A lot of them can do both. So you can use linear regression, actually both for regression. Well, that's not true. So our first models that we talked about for supervised learning, linear regression is kind of the prototype of a lot of what I think of as machine learning algorithms, right? And that's really a regression. And then we looked at logistic regression, which maybe a better name for that would have been logistic classification. It's kind of it's a modification of the fitness function for linear regression to make it work for a classification task. All right. Anyway, so that's supervised learning. So for unsupervised learning, there are useful techniques where you don't know ahead of time what your classes are or what the target is. So mostly here in clustering, we are talking about more kind of about interested in classification. So the main idea on clustering is we don't know what categories might be there in our data. Okay, so I'm sure if you did the readings, there might be some examples of this. So we might not know ahead of time what are good classes, how to divide the data up. So clustering, one thing you can do with clustering is to give you that is to have it tell you what looks like natural breakdown, natural clusters of the data that you have. Okay, so I should have been. I don't talk a lot in this class. There is some readings on some other things. So besides the dimensionality reduction, the PCA, and the other kinds of dimensionality reduction techniques from Chapter 8, which is another type of unsupervised learning. Besides besides clustering, so it doesn't have to be hierarchical clustering, but k-means is kind of that's not true. So we'll look at some different clustering, hierarchical clustering, k-means. Hopefully you did the readings for Chapter 9, so you can look at, there's some other things that are discussed in this chapter. Anomaly detection. Anomaly detection is kind of like a specialized version of doing a classification problem where the class that you want to detect is very rare. So an anomaly usually is going to be something that is out of the ordinary, right? So anomaly detection is kind of like a binary classification, but where the anomalies are usually occur much less often, right? So there's so some of the things that we did discuss in this class for having to deal with a classification task where you have a highly skewed set of data. You have much more of one representative class than another. Some of that becomes very important for anomaly detection. So density estimation, I'll skip over that. So let's look at clustering here. So for both kind of k-means and hierarchical clustering, the basic idea is, this is kind of a good image if you didn't do the readings from our textbook here, right? So for unsupervised learning, you would have data like this, really. So conceptually what it is we don't have the label. So the reason why we're able to use color and shape over here is because we have this is a classification task, and we have the 3 different classes. So we have a column or a feature in our original data set, which is really the actual answer, of what these are. the type of flower, setosa, versicolor, virginica. Right? So for unsupervised learning, or if you have a big data set of data that you don't have a preconceived notion ahead of time of what your categories are, it's just unlabeled data. So a clustering algorithm can look at this data and partition and give you an idea of how to partition it. Morning. Into a good set of classes here. So yeah. Anyway, so that's the basics of what we want to do with this kind of clustering for an unsupervised learning technique. All right. So yeah. So here's the thing I was thinking about before. So it does give. If you did the readings from the textbook, there's a couple of examples of where this kind of clustering might, how it's used sometimes in the real world. So, like customer segmentation, right? So, you might be able to segment your users of a site into different kinds of types of users, right? So I was talking about like purchasing on a website, but like you think of like a recommender system, like on, say, Netflix or something like that. So you might try and find your users that are interested in thrillers and things like that, right? Or whatever the natural kind of clusters are, right? So you wouldn't go in with a preconceived notion of the types of users, the kind of content or the kinds of products that they're most looking for on your system. This kinds of unsupervised clustering techniques can, examine the data and partition it for you into things that make natural sense given your data set. So, okay, so yeah, so I'm also talking about, I think, k-means clustering for the rest of the time. So yeah, like I was saying, we might not take too much time here. I just wanted to mention a few things about the k-means clustering. That is, the first part of the assignment 6. Yeah, I did forget to mention, so don't forget about that. I am looking for that. Our final assignment is due on Friday this week, so we'll be done with the assignments once you turn that in, except for the class project then, so, that we talked about. So k-means clustering is relatively easy, and in fact, right, the assignment 6, if I didn't talk about it before, we're really what we're doing is you have to write a few functions we're implementing k-means clustering by hand in assignment 6, right? So it's simple enough that you can break it up into the 2 or 3 separate tasks that we do in assignment 6 to perform the basics of k-mean clustering. So in our assignment, if I can jump back to that real quickly, we basically start by selecting a set of k centers. So k centroids is the term that our textbook uses on this, right? So the only metaparameter for k-means clustering is you do have to beforehand tell the algorithm how many clusters you want it to find in your data set. So that is, that has big effects on what you will get out of it, right? So you might have to do a little bit of data analysis beforehand to kind of come up with some idea of how many clusters, how many partitions do I want it to find for me, right? Or as we'll probably talk about a little bit later here, you can, systematically explore different values of k and kind of compare the results using different sort of metrics to see how well or how badly it might be partitioning your data. So anyway, so for k-means clustering, if we want to, like back to our textbook example, if for this data set, if we kind of had this picture ahead of time, did a little bit of data analysis, we might assume that there's kind of 5 natural clusters in here, although the nature of the clusters is a bit different. We've got 2 that are a little bit more nebulous, spread out, and 3 that are a bit tighter. But we might want to try and have it partitioned into 5 kind of clusters that looks like the natural sorts of things that might be happening here, right? And then, I guess it's a judgment call. I mean, maybe you think of that as 2 clusters, or maybe that's 1 cluster that's just a little bit of a gap there, which could be missing data. But so 4 or 5 anyway looks kind of natural for this example, unlabeled data set from our textbook. Right? So given that, you start off, you tell it how many clusters that you want. Often we have to pick that number of centroids at random for k-means. Okay? So the usual way, the way that the implementation in scikit-learn does that, I believe, is like if we say k is 5, it will just select 5 of the points in the unlabeled data set. So 5 of the samples at random to be the initial clusters. Okay? An alternative method is you could just randomly generate. So if you know the range, so again, like for this figure from our textbook, we've only got 2 features, just generically x1 and x2. X1 ranges from something like -3 to 1, or a little bit less than -3, a little bit bigger than 1, but it has a range. So, if we want 5 centroids at random, instead of picking 5 points, we could just generate 5 sets of xy or x1, x2 coordinates, where x1 is somewhere with like a normal random value between -3 and 1. And x2 then also has a range from like 1 to 3, or a little bit below 1 to above 3. Right? So those are the 2 main ways. So the second method I was just describing, you'd have to first figure out kind of what the range is of each of your features, and then generate that number of vector, that number of points with however many features, how many dimensions you have, usually using like a normal random distribution for the range of each feature. So either way, it tends to be, for what we're going to be doing is, when you implement this, I think on the third part is you're supposed to just use the first method, so select k samples at random, so it's easy using NumPy to use a method to do sampling, basically, so we can sample without replacement and get k, whatever we specify k is, the number of partitions that we want to do in here. So the basic algorithm, so given the current set of the centroids, you first start off by finding, for every sample in your data set, you find the centroid. So here CI means I ranges from 0 to k, or 0 to k minus 1. So if we have 3 centroids, let me go back to my other figure. So if we have 5 centroids that we're trying to find, like in our figure from the textbook, we would call that centroid 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So I could be either 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4, for whatever it is. So we basically have to find and assign each point in our sample to the closest centroid of however many centroids we have, right? So that means that for every sample, when you do this assignment here, the one that minimizes that, it'll have been assigned, or it'll be associated with whichever centroid of the current position of centroids each of the samples is closest to. So this over here is really just notation for the distance. The distance between the sample, the ith sample, and I was saying something a little bit wrong there. So this is the centroid for the ith sample. So I is really the sample number. in this notation here. And anyway, so we're just going to be using Euclidean distance. So this is basically an Euclidean distance. So the norm, the square of the norm. So you can just think of that as the distance between the sample and the centroid. And we're finding the centroid that each one is closest to. So that's what what the task 2 is doing on your assignment. So given the samples X and the current set of centroids, returns a new vector, which should just be the centroid number, the one that each of these X points is closest to. Right? So k-means is just is an iterative algorithm. So once you've found the closest centroid, we're going to recompute the centroids. Jump back to the textbook here. So yeah, this is kind of the figure where it's giving the description of what I'm kind of going through right now here. So if initially, if our centroids are random here, and so we can't kind of see from this figure, but then we would, the upper left might be the initial, if we're clustering into 5 partitions here, these are our initial random points, right? So I guess in the discussion of the textbook, it's using just a random assignment when it talks about it, rather than sampling 5 points. Either way. So from there, so the first method that you're writing for the assignment, we would assign every point to what its closest centroid is. So conceptually what that does is it partitions up the space. That's what the label of the instance is. So what you would look at is, every point that's in like this yellow here is closest to that centroid than to any other, right? So you'll naturally get these dividing lines, right? So like here, since we've got these 2 points, these 2 centroids initially randomly, that divides this kind of, should be kind of mostly dividing that in half here. So the ones over here would be assigned to this centroid, and the ones over there will be assigned to that centroid. So then the second function in the assignment is what we're doing for k-means is we're just iterating over that. So once we've assigned all the points, so this is kind of a representation of where they get assigned, we're going to update a new centroid based on the points that were within that. So if you think about it visually here, so like if we look at all these points here that were closest to this one, if I recalculate the centroid, so the point that's in the equidistant basically to all of the points in there, that will have the effect of creating a centroid that's somewhere like here basically is the centroid for the things in the orange one. So that's the result of the update from the initial find closest that we had on the upper right here. Right? Then you keep doing that. So again, we repartition after we move the centroids and update again, right? So this figure, I mean, it is changing a little bit, maybe not real dramatically, because the initial 5 points weren't too far apart. But you do see that from the initial 5 random points, it ends up with a clustering like this. So something kind of like we were thinking of when we looked at the data set ahead of time, right? So we end up with the clusters on these, right? So if you keep iterating like that, eventually the points will stop changing. So when we do the assignment, if all the points end up being assigned to the same cluster they were at previously, the centroid wouldn't move. And at that point, you basically had converged. So k-means clustering doing this iteration should always eventually converge like that. It'll always get to a point where this update phase doesn't change which centroid a point is closer to. And so if none of the points change, the centroids will stay where they were at. And we won't see anything changing after that point. So yeah, like it's saying here, yeah, I'll just go into that. So, actually, let me just go back to the assignment. So that's really what the two functions are. So, one to do that first part, which is really doing the determination of labeling. So given the current centroids, figuring out which centroid every sample is closest to, and then from there, once you have the assigned centroids, we can update or compute the new set of centroids as is described here. So when you're doing this update, it may be a little bit tough to describe, but it's really easy to calculate. So if I want to calculate, the updated centroid for all the points that were assigned, like for example in this orange, all you have to do is take the average of all these. So, you should do it in a it's easy to do this in a vectorized way, but conceptually I could just take all the samples that were closest to this centroid here and find their average of x1 and their average of x2, and that will be the location of the new centroid along my two features, x1 and x2. But yeah, you don't have to do that as a loop. You can do that just an all-in-one step using NumPy vectorized operations to get the mean with respect to each of the feature columns and you can use slicing. So really, the result that's returned back from the find centroids, this really is just an index. So for each one of your samples, that should just be the centroid number of the sample. So you can do that to find all the ones that are closest to centroid 0, and only use those to compute the new centroid 0 and so on. Right? So C really ends up use that directly as a fancy index into X to pull out just the ones that were assigned where C is 0. So you want all those samples where C is 0 out of X to compute the new centroid 0 where C is 1 and so on. So for that, some of this, like what I was just describing there, you do probably, it's fine to use some loops. Probably the easiest solution for most people is to loop over all of your K clusters. So inside of here, like for the update, like I'm just describing, you can loop from cluster 0, 1, 2, 3, whatever K is, and to build the new set of centroids that's returned back from here. All right, yeah, and then the last, once you get those two functions, you can put that together relatively simply. So the third task is to reuse those two functions and implement that basic loop. Although, we simplify it a little bit in the assignment. If you haven't done this part of the assignment yet, we just do hard code it for a number of iterations. So the way it actually works in like scikit-learn or robust implementations of k-means clustering is it will add another function that detects whether it's converged or not, and we'll just keep doing iterations until we reach convergence. but for us, we'll kind of skip that. It's not too tough to write a function, a third function that detects whether whether we converged or not, right? So one approach for that is if the previous set of centroids assignments when we define class. So if you just keep the previous C, and then on the loop when the next time when we calculate a new set of closest centroids, then if you compare that C, if none of the values have changed from one iteration to the next to the other, that means they all got assigned to the same centroid, and you've converged at that point. So, but I'll leave that as kind of an exercise. But it's not too tough to actually modify the third one to do true kind of convergence the way that k-means actually usually works. So, but we will just iterate a fixed number like 10 times by default on our assignment here. So one thing, so that's most of the stuff I think people need to know for the first part of the assignment 6. So a few other things about k-means clustering. So although it is guaranteed to converge eventually, although I mean it could take some time to converge. If you have a very large data set, it's not guaranteed that it'll be quick to get down to convergence. But it will eventually converge. But depending on the initial location of the centroids, you can actually converge to different partitions, right? So k-means clustering is non-deterministic, is the technical term for this. Right? So since we start with some initial randomly located centroids, there can be more than one attractor in the space, or more than one place where it will converge down to. So this shows the two kind of things. For using k of 5, depending on the location of the initial 5 random points, there's 2 attractors, I think, for that data set from the textbook. So the one here, or actually there must be more than 2, right? So we saw one basically up here, which is kind of the one that we were thinking of when we did this. Here's 2 others, right? So you can't tell ahead of time how many attractors there might be in the data set. But you can, there is a way to kind of compare the goodness of the partition of here, and that's what's discussed at this part of the textbook if you did the regions, right? So here was 2 others. So for both of these, it kind of combined these 2 things into one, and it split either this one, this bigger kind of nebulous one into 2, or this one here in the middle into 2 different parts, right? Which for a real problem, where you're going to have thousands, tens of thousands, maybe even more features, you couldn't visualize like this. So you wouldn't be able to really plot something like this and say, oh, well, I much prefer that first clustering than these other ones that it might converge on, right? So So I'll skip over it yet. You can, do something to try and initialize the centroids, but again, that takes a lot of knowledge ahead of time. So here, I just mentioned this. I I wouldn't normally use a hand-built version of k-means clustering for one reason, for things like this. So in like scikit-learn, it will automatically do what's described here for you. So it will actually perform a number of random, so perform the k-means clustering some number of times. So the default is to do 10 clusterings. And then each one of those 10 times is evaluated with a performance metric. So the performance metrics is similar to the fitness that we used for linear regression. So so it describes it. So it's using this called inertia, but it's really the mean squared distance. Okay, so it's similar to the mean squared distance we use for logistic regression here. So, but you can think of it that as it's basically the average of the distance of all the points to the final clusters that were found here, right? And what you will find is usually for the solutions that are intuitively better is so if you average the distances for this one here between the points in the final centroid and for these, you'll get a lower mean square difference. So they call it inertia there, but you'll get a lower value on that metric for these kinds of clusters. And that's what is returned by default from scikit-learn, right? So you don't really have to do anything if you're using scikit-learn like is shown in this example here. You do have to specify the number of clusters, but nothing else if you don't want to. You don't have to specify the initial centroids or other things. And by default, it will do multiple clusterings based on the number of nits and return the model that ends up with the lowest of that inertia, that average of the distances between the points and the centroid that it converged on for each of the 10 runs or however many runs that you do there. So I think a little bit of an aside, but if you're interested in some more details of that, the other notebook that was coming from Dr. Ng's discussion of the unsupervised learning has more examples of doing that, kind of doing that by hand even. The local minima and so on. So just looking at this again, for example, down here, we're actually showing doing that same thing by hand, right? So checking for the local minima. So we run the clustering 1,000 times and we set the in and nit to 1. So it only does 1. So it returns the one that it finds. And then here we show among the 1,000 times the different costs that we come up with on that inertia measure, right? So it ranges from 78.85 up to 140, and there for the iris data set where we're using 3 clusters, it actually has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different attractors that it'll converge on, where one of those would probably be the one, the 2 really small one, actually the three smallest ones are probably all pretty similar. So those will all look about the same. And those will be the ones that you would kind of intuitively break your data up into, partition it. And then you get two others that will be kind of different ways of doing three clusters here on this one. Okay. So yeah, I mean, k-means, so the stuff we do with it in this class and our examples in our assignment 6, we use relatively small data sets, so performance isn't an issue, but it can take a while to converge, as I was kind of hinting at. So there are, again, in scikit-learn, there are things that can help you still do like a k-means clustering if you need to on big data sets that are going to take a long time to converge. So that's discussed a little bit in the chapter here, where it's using some sort of a batching method to do a clustering. Also, like I said, so this is also in that other notebook that's based on Dr. Ng's thing. So you probably, for a real data set, you really can't visualize it like we're doing. You can't just plot it out and see what might be the natural number of clusters, so the size of k that you should use. So another common thing to do if you want to do k-means clustering in a real data set is to maybe estimate what a good number of partitions is that you want to use on the data set. So if basically if you use that inertia measure again, and here if you do the readings about this, we're trying it with different sizes of k, 2 through 8 for I don't remember what data set, but we're using the default in scikit-learn to have it do multiple runs and give us the lowest inertia, that lowest performance measure when number of clusters is 2, 3, 4, and 5. Right? So and if you plot that out, usually it should. The more clusters you have, the lower that inertia will be. But often you will get something like this, where there's a definite elbow, a definite change in the trend, where it goes from going really fast to the slope is slowing down. So that's often a good candidate, or at least around that, right? So if it's changing rapidly, it's probably too small. And if it's once it starts changing slower, much more incrementally, this inertia measure for higher values of k, you can always get that lower and lower by just So at the extreme, if you set k to be the number of samples that you have, you'll get an inertia of 0 because every centroid will end up on each one of every one of your samples. Right? So you can always get this to 0 by having just a ridiculously large number of k, but that doesn't give you any information about what are the good sort of relationships between your data set. Right? So that's what you're trying to find here is a good balance between something that's obviously not big enough, but has enough sort of clusters to be useful, giving some idea of things that are related to one another. Okay, so kind of as a final thing, again, I hope people are doing all the readings that we assign in this class here. There's lots of other kind of discussion of issues on like k-means clustering. I'll just mention another. So another one that I sometimes have found it useful to use is hierarchical clustering. So I wish there was more discussion of this. So hierarchical clustering is very often done in lots of areas for genetics or evolution, where they're trying to, like, for example, figure out the probable evolutionary tree, so which species branched off, so this kind of hierarchical clustering is also another useful one that I found useful in several different instances. The basic idea of this is you start. It's like a bottom-up approach. All right, so you basically find start with no things connected, and you find the nearest pair of clusters. So initially, there's no clusters at all, and I won't go. So you have to formally define what we mean by the nearest pair of clusters, but you can kind of think of that again as sort of distance, like we were doing for our central aims. And then, so once you find the nearest two, you create a new cluster of those, and then you keep doing that. So now you'll have just one cluster that's of the two nearest ones, and then every other single one, and you again find the nearest out of all that. You keep dividing that. So the result of that will end up being like a branching tree. So if you've ever seen what are these called? So this technique is used. I'm most familiar with it in analysis of species evolution. So coming up with evolutionary trees using this kind of hierarchical or agglomerative clustering here. So yeah, I'm surprised our textbook doesn't seem to mention. I know that you can do that in scikit-learn, but yeah, I don't know what I'd have to go do a Google search of if you want to do this kind of hierarchical cluster, what method you use in scikit-learn for that kind of clustering. All right. Okay, so yeah, just to wrap up, I think that was kind of all I wanted to kind of touch on today. And again, so yeah, sorry we didn't have a video on Tuesday, but yeah, these are most of the things that I wanted to mention to people about the k-means clustering, and just go once again over on the assignment 6. So yeah, so let me know. I've had a few questions about assignment 6, but make certain you get that finished up. And we are coming up on wrapping up the course. We still have 2 big things after assignment 6, though, that you need to do. So, I would recommend that you get assignment 6 done on time, and make certain, that you have been making progress. So it's a bit late now if you haven't really been doing anything on the class project to been doing stuff on it. So you should really get going on that and put some time into it if you haven't been doing weekly stuff like I've been suggesting. So. All right, and yeah, so we got one more week of meetings. It'll mostly be review stuff next week. So if people have questions on the second test and stuff, that'll be the main focus next week. So.
When is the main test?
What's that?
When is the main test?
The
test, the exams.
The when we're gonna hold it? You mean the time or?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it will be online again. So I can't remember what I did for test 1, but it'll be kind of the same thing. So I'll probably open up like Thursday and Friday, or maybe Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, like the same that I did for test one. It's the same format as well. So I'll have it open up for 2 or 3 days, but it'll be a 2-hour time limit. And there'll be 2 or 3 questions that you get through the MyLeo online quiz, but it's really questions where you have to have a running IPython notebook and answer the questions using Python code, and then upload the finished IPython notebook. So, but yeah, next week at the end of the week, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, maybe Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I need to check. I'm just gonna open it up the same that I did for the test one, the same days. But I can be flexible on that too. So if people do need a little bit earlier, maybe not before Wednesday, but if you need a little bit after Friday, that's probably okay too. So just let me know about that. All right, yeah, that's it. I'll see you guys later then.